Well, my story is...
In 1982, on the 30th of December, right between Christmas and New Year's Eve, a little girl named Katie Beers was born in the town of Mastic Beach, Long Island. But to people familiar with this case, she's ended up being known as the girl in the wall.
Tell me something.
He threw me on the bed.
I just want my daughter back. Please bring her back.
And then I was screaming my brains out.
I heard her say a man was coming after her with a knife, and she said, oh my God, here he comes.
He started kissing me.
Our biggest concern is that we find this child, well and safe.
My hand hit a nail.
The last time I seen her was when she was walking towards the machine. I started getting scared.
Then he locks me in that little cubby hole.
Kidnapped, assaulted, trapped, and chained up, 9-year-old Katie Beers was abandoned by her mom, then used as a slave by her godmother and her sexually deviant husband, before eventually getting kidnapped and trapped in an underground dungeon. For over 3 weeks, the Long Island police dug deep into this menagerie of characters, each more suspicious than the next, in hopes of getting their hands on the captive 9-year-old.
She's behind the wall. If she's behind the wall, she's not alive.
But to their surprise, she was already at it. She knew how to save herself.
She tried every strategy she could to make him change his mind and ultimately prevailed. This little girl at 10 years old changed a kidnapper's mind.
In the small hamlet of Bayshore, Long Island, busy little girl Katie is living a Cinderella-like existence. Since her mother abandoned her, she has been enslaved by her godmother, Linda, and her husband, Sal.
I was their servant, whether it was to do the laundry, to clean the bathrooms, to cook dinner. That was my purpose to her growing up. I was pretty much her slave.
But her service to Linda was the least of her concern, since the real monster in that house was none other than her own uncle.
From the time that I was 2 years old, I was sexually abused by my godmother's husband.
When she was 7 years old, Katie had enough, and she tried to tell her godmother the truth about her husband, but her reaction only made it worse.
She told me that I was a liar and to get out of her face.
Katie wasn't allowed to attend school and grew up completely isolated. The only friend she had was John Esposito, the typical family friend, but to her, their relationship was special.
I really didn't have any friends my own age. I think in my childhood, the thing that probably made me the happiest was when I got to spend time with John. I would say I loved him. He was always a confidant, somebody that I would trust.
Amid all of the abuse she already had to go through, Katie's life was about to take a turn for the worse.
2 days before my 10th birthday, I was abducted.
On that day, Katie was left with John, and together they went to Spaceplex, her favorite place in all of Long Island.
At Spaceplex, you can ride motorcycles, shoot baskets, or even ride a dinosaur.
For my 10th birthday, it was going to be just Big John and I.
John was nicknamed Big John by the local kids because he was a well-known member of the Big Brother Big Sister program.
Whenever we would go to Spaceplex, I was happy. There was never really a care. There were kids running all over the place.
But her birthday would soon turn sour, as the worst thing that could ever happen to a child came to be.
It was a man kidnapped me and he had a knife. Oh no, here he comes, I gotta go.
Katie.
That voice, calling out Katie's name, is Linda, her godmother. But while she was contacting the police, they were already on the scene with Big John at Spaceplex. They evacuated the site and searched for the rest of the day, but all of these efforts were in vain.
He picked me up and carried me into the closet where I realized he was opening up a door to expose a tunnel.
Whoever got their hands on her was an extremely apt individual. That tunnel was set up behind the walls of his house and carefully crafted by an expert. Katie was forced to crawl until she reached a trap door.
And then he exposes this hole and he opens up this door into this room. The only word that I have to describe this room was a dungeon, a place that I couldn't escape.
Inside, Katie saw a dirty mattress in a makeshift, soundproof casket surrounded by chains.
My captor looked at me and said, "This is your home now."
I heard her say a man was coming after her with a knife, and she said, oh my God, here he comes. So by the time I picked up the phone to talk to her, I got nothing.
This is all of what the godmother Linda had to say about the ominous call she received on the day of the abduction. This was enough to concern Dominic Verone, the head of the Long Island Police Kidnapping Division.
By the time she gets to the machine, Katie had already hung up. That disturbed me because there's been a lot of times when these abductions are not really abductions. They're made to look like abductions.
And statistically, he was right,
You saw this young girl around?
as over 95% of kidnappings are actually perpetrated by close family members. But this wasn't the only unusual thing about that call.
It just struck me as not believable. And I immediately was disturbed by the fact that a 9-year-old child would use the word kidnap. Also, how does a 9-year-old child get away from an abductor and able to use the telephone?
But he had to put his suspicions on the side for now. The priority was Katie, as every minute counted in that kind of case. They needed to find her, and fast.
As much as I was concerned about some of the problems with the call, you did hear a girl in distress. This girl was in danger.
There was absolutely no trace of Katie at Spaceplex, almost as if she was never there. The only clue they had was the recording of Katie's distressed call to Linda, so Verone decided to bring out the big guns.
We sent the audio tape of that telephone call, as well as the device that it was recorded on, to the FBI.
While he was waiting for the FBI, Verone continued his investigation. Naturally, he started by looking into the most likely suspects.
The main players were Marilyn Beers, the natural mother, a dysfunctional, incompetent mother, Linda Engelary, the godmother.
My main concern is to let people know how much I cared for her.
She was used by the godmother to run all kinds of errands. Sal Engelary had been charged with sexual abuse on Katie Beers.
The little girl don't want to live in Mastic Beach with her mother.
But there was also a fourth suspect, outside of the family, the last man to see her before the abduction.
John Esposito, not a relative, but a family friend. He said something dirty happened.
The FBI eventually shared what they found with him. It seemed that Katie's call was made from a phone booth in front of Spaceplex, which is weird since they still had found no trace of her inside of the recreation center, and she apparently tried to call Linda 19 times before she decided to leave a message on her answering machine. But all of these clues were nothing compared to the result of the audio analysis the FBI carried out on the call.
I never forget the call I got from the scientist at the FBI lab who gave me the next bit of breaking news. It wasn't actually Katie who broke free and made that call. It was a recording. It was someone who tape recorded Katie and wanted us to believe, or it to seem, that the call came from that telephone booth next to Spaceplex.
The detective was starting to put the pieces together, and it became evident that the culprit fooled them all. The kidnapping of Katie has been used as a front to something far more sinister.
The phone call was a scripted plot by an individual to make us think that Katie Beers was abducted.
Back
Why?
at the dungeon, Katie knew what was going to happen and decided to fight as hard as she could. She noticed the door of the casket was loose and went at it.
Eventually, I had kicked it long enough and hard enough that that snapped, and I was able to kind of safely exit.
To her, this was such a breakthrough. She thought she may finally be able to find a way to escape, almost forgetting that the casket was, itself, inside of the dungeon.
Then I had nowhere to go. I remember trying to like go on the shelf and see if there was anything there that I could use for some sort of self-defense. And there were a bunch of keys up there. So unknowingly, I grabbed one of those keys and hid it underneath the mattress.
Before she had the chance to try to come up with a way to confront him, she heard him coming. It was too late now, as the footsteps started to get louder and louder.
As soon as he came down, he saw the door open, and he then raped me for the first time.
For the rest of her time in captivity, her abductor would assault her multiple times, every day, but out of respect for Katie, we won't be covering any of her subsequent assaults.
I was able to have the TV on 24/7. It was on the news that